This is Backstory, the podcast powered by the newsroom of the Ithaca Voice. I'm Megan Zerez. It's Tuesday, July 7th. From the start, Asteri Ithaca was supposed to represent a bold response to Ithaca's most pressing housing and economic problems. 181 new affordable apartment units, a brand new conference center, a plan to provide housing to 40 formerly unhoused households, and all that in the heart of downtown Ithaca. But 2 years since the first tenants moved in, a lot has changed. This week on Backstory, the evictions at Asteri. That's after a short break. Stay with us.
Backstory is supported by Cayuga Health and Arnott Health, members of Centralis Health, connecting our community with accessible, compassionate care that's built around you. From same-day appointments to long-term wellness support, Centralis Health helps you stay healthy and informed. Learn more at centralishealth.org.
You're listening to Backstory. I'm Megan Zerez. It's been 2 years since Asteri Ithaca first welcomed its first tenants. 4 months since the city had temporarily declared the building unfit for human habitation, and a lot has changed. Most notably, there have been over 50 eviction filings brought against residents in the past 3 months. My colleague Jimmy Jordan is back to help explain how we got to that point. So, Jimmy, we've been talking about this one for a while, but there is one really big update lately, and that is these evictions. Quickly, how many were there, and when did we start finding out about these?
Yeah, we have been talking about Asteri for a while because we keep having stories to put out about it, but honestly, it's been a troubling and really long-standing problem at this point. So, yeah, the evictions, we've been following the court calendars for Ithaca City Court, and there were 25 eviction cases filed in April, then 28 in June. So that's bringing us to 53 eviction cases.
Right. There's 181 units in that building, so it's a large chunk of people who are living there.
One thing I'd add, too, is we know this building it's entirely an affordable housing complex. We just don't know what share of those evictions are being targeted at that part of the building's population that are living in supportive units that are transitioning out of homelessness.
Right. And there are only 40 units of that supportive housing.
Yeah.
I think the timing is really important in understanding why these evictions are so significant and why all of them are happening all at once. So these court dates happened about 3 months after the city took this very drastic action of declaring the building unfit for human habitation. Tell me about the city's rationale, when they made that decision back in March.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to connect, right? There's this order to vacate the building in March, and then in April, we start seeing these eviction cases come forward. So the city found that the Asteri Ithaca building, this 12-story high-rise with a conference center on its first 3 stores and 181 apartment units, was not safe. The stairwells basically would function like chimneys. Smoke would fill the floors. And if there were a blaze, there's a high potential for mass death. So they ordered the building to be emptied until the fire safety issues were addressed. That issue came after months of complaints about mountains of trash, biohazards like human waste in the hallways, broken windows, just, a kind of building that had not been effectively managed and that houses this very, vulnerable population full of people with their own individual issues. So the building ended up reopening on March 20th, so about 2 weeks after that March 4th order to vacate. And the Vecino Group, the owners of Asteri, the operators, they ended up getting this kind of serious charge to, get their act together, bring Asteri under control. And that's when we start seeing these evictions in April, which I don't think that's what city officials told them. They told them to get the building better managed.
Well, yeah, and we'll come back to the evictions in a bit, but what were some of the changes that Vecino was supposed to make?
They needed to improve the hygiene of the building, and the county has been on their case about that as well, but we'll get to that in a bit, I think. One big thing they had to do was implement better security. There was a lot of people coming in and out of the building that didn't live there. There was an old story that we put out about this one woman who had recovered from her addiction, but, was still getting this dealer showing up at her door every day asking her if she wants to buy. And, that was a struggle that she had to deal with because of that poor security.
Since they reopened the building, they did actually make some pretty big changes. And one of the really big changes is when they reopened the building, they weren't even giving residents a way to enter the building on their own. Like, they didn't even have the keys to the front door of the building. They had to be sort of let in and vetted by security, which was, I can imagine, not the most convenient or popular thing for residents who are living there.
It's definitely had like a mixed reaction. You know, some people feel like the increased security makes the building more secure. Other people feel like it's way too restrictive. The tenants' rights advocates I've spoke to have, brought this up as an issue in terms of like reaching the residents of Asteri Ithaca.
Right. Well, in the past, Vecino has definitely taken a more of a permissive approach towards evictions. I remember at one point there was a representative who was telling, I think it was county legislators, that, they're trying not to evict people because they're sort of mindful that this is a pretty vulnerable population. There was one case where it was a tenant who was evicted, but it was only after he had been suspected of several arson attempts. And these evictions now that are happening all at once, it's definitely a marked departure from how they had handled these things in the past. You were able to go through some of those court filings. You were there in court. What were some of the reasons for Vecino seeking those evictions?
The evictions that did end up going through, Vecino had cited that the tenant was behind on rent. There was one case I remember for a tenant that didn't end up showing up where Vecino said that they owed over $15,000 in back rent. And that person didn't even show up in court that day. They might not know about it. Like, who knows why they weren't there? And the judge ordered an eviction and entitled Vecino to that money. And then there's a lot of cases where the tenant, if they had legal representation, they requested a 2-week adjournment, which is a statutory normality. That was really kind of the two types of decisions that were happening.
Wow. So what happens if those people can't pay?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess Vecino could pursue further legal action at that point.
Wow. What percentage roughly of the cases that were on the docket that particular day on June 25th, I want to say?
Yeah.
What percentage of those cases were represented?
Had legal representation?
Yeah.
I'd say a little more than half.
Okay. One of the things that we've been trying to figure out is just how many people are still living in that building. We know that there are 181 units. Multiple people might be living in each unit. When the building was ordered closed by the city, Vecino was required to put people up in hotel rooms, and 138 people took advantage of that program. But now the building, I walked past the other day, it just seemed a lot less busy. Do we have a sense of how many people are actually still living there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Vecino should be able to answer that question, but, basically since they initially responded to our inquiry in March about the order to vacate, ever since then, they haven't responded to a request for comment from us. And so knowing how many people live in the building that's their information. It's not something the city knows. I feel like I'm trying to triangulate how many people live in the Asteri building. We know that there's units that are uninhabitable. There's one where a e-bike exploded in the unit and it was stripped down to the studs.
Oh my God.
Because of that. And that's something that the mayor publicly talked about in a presentation to the county legislature back in May. We know that there are definitely less people living there than there were before the order to vacate. But how many people are in the building? I don't know.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, one of the things that in past times that we've been able to go into the building and talk to people, there are just units that are just open. The doors are open. They're empty. Maybe there's a lease on those units, but there's nobody there.
Yeah, it's eerie.
Yeah, it's very strange. And who knows how many of the people who are being evicted were actually living in that building at the time that maybe they got the papers served to them or whatever.
Right. I mean, there was one case in court last week where Asteri was trying to evict a resident, but it turned out that person wasn't even alive anymore.
Wow.
The resident in that unit is living in that apartment under their deceased friend or relative's name.
Wow.
It's like one of these things where doing these evictions and then you go, okay, they're trying to evict this person who's not even alive right now.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they don't even know.
Yeah. I approached the property manager after court last week and tried to ask some questions, and then they were like, no comment, no comment. You have to go to Jordan Gibson, who's pretty much the spokesperson for the Vecino group. And of course, we didn't get a response then. So it's a lot of just question marks.
You briefly brought up a presentation that Ithaca Mayor Rob Cantelmo made to the Tompkins County Legislature. One thing the mayor did say is that there were potentially only 3 active leases in the building.
Yeah, I mean, it's very anecdotal. Ithaca Mayor Rob Cantelmo brought this up to the county legislature that he was told by a Vecino group representative that there was only 3 active leases in the building. But, the building is bringing over 50 eviction cases to the court. So I'm a little confused by what does 3 active leases mean. Sometimes, you have to actually evict somebody if they're squatting in a building. And there's questions that are fair to ask and should have a clear answer, but really only a Vecino can answer them. Does 3 active leases mean 3 leases that are in perfect compliance with the rules of the building, that just don't have lease violations? I followed up with the mayor earlier today just to ask, hey, do you know anything else about this? And he was basically like, I was told that in April. I shared that with the county legislature in May. I don't have an update on that. And, that number is really only Vecino can answer that number.
Right. And for context, we're taping this on July 2nd.
Right.
Can you tell me what other issues Cantelmo pointed out, having been there more recently?
He really emphasized just continued disappointment in Vecino. We have limited tools as a city to force this building owner to do what we want them to do. And if they're not going to do it, in some cases, the city's hands are tied. He described the stairwell in the building as reeking of urine. Pretty sad state of affairs is the picture that he gave.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we'll go over some of the public reaction to the evictions. Stay with us.
Local news is the heartbeat of our community. When you become a recurring donor, you're helping to ensure the Ithaca Voice stays independent and free for everyone today and for the years to come. Donate today at ithacavoice.org.
You're listening to Backstory. I'm Megan Zerez. The city isn't the only local government entity that has been trying to crack down. The County Board of Health has also been trying to take measures of their own. Tell me about those efforts.
Yeah, so the Tompkins County Board of Health had told the Vecino group that they need to implement a waste management plan, and then the Vecino group failed to do that, resulting in $40,000 of fines back in April. Just to emphasize for people listening, I mean, the conditions in the hallways and in the trash rooms, it's worse on certain floors than others. And I don't know what the status of all those things are right now, but at one time, I mean, you couldn't even climb through the door, trash spilling out. And, obviously that brings cockroaches, that brings, just damage to the room and to the floors. So this waste management plan was no small deal. It had, I think, to a lot of residents, been a long time coming.
I think you're referring to photos from an inspection that I believe occurred back in February.
Right.
And there are multiple trash rooms throughout the building on each floor, right? Trash chute rooms. And in some of them, it looked to be about chest high. And if you're a shorter person like me, certainly
I think it was chest high for me, too.
Yeah. I mean,
as a slightly taller person.
As a slightly taller person. Either way, I mean, not something you really should be seeing.
No. And you were just reminding me that there's an additional $9,000 of fines that occurred last month in June.
Yeah. So in the original citation that the Board of Health had passed, it was $40,000 payable at that time back in April, and then an additional $9,000 would kick in if Vecino had failed to implement, all of these improvements and changes by the end of April. We did just have a Board of Health meeting last week that I was at, and at that meeting, they determined that Vecino had made some progress, but they still had not completely met all of the requirements that they were supposed to make They were represented by a local attorney. He read a short statement saying Vecino was working on it. They didn't really fight it very much. The board didn't really discuss that very much. It seemed like they had kind of had that discussion previously. Basically, the Board of Health moved the deadline a little bit for them, and now they have until late July. And at that point, if they fail to do so, then they will be paying that $9,000.
Gotcha.
When you were there in court during these evictions, did their lawyer speak to you at all?
When I approached the property manager and the attorney, the property manager repeatedly said no comment to some of my questions. And I looked at the attorney and I was like, well, can you answer any of this? And the attorney just goes, I'm just representing them in these eviction cases. That's all I'm here to do.
Wow.
I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, okay, so not really get anything here.
With all these evictions, there were tenants' rights advocates who have thoughts on the whole matter. What are they saying?
When I was talking to one tenant right advocate who is associated with the Ithaca Tenants Union, they're trying to keep people informed of what their options are and their resources. And it's very common for renters to run into issues where they lose a utility and then they're owed back rent for that, or they're supposed to get a discount on their rent going forward.
Right, the landlord fails to provide hot water or something like that.
Right, yeah. And so, a lot of these advocates are basically just trying to say, like, if you live in Asteri, there's been utility shutdowns in addition to all the other problems we've described. Like, you might not owe the number they say you owe. Like, you should really get some legal help. And there's a nonprofit law firm, Law & Wine. That's the firm that's been representing a lot of the Asteri residents in these eviction cases. And so just actually get back to your question of, like, what are these advocates saying? I mean, one that I spoke with said they thought that this was a part of a strategy to basically turn over the building's population. And they were pretty upset by it because, in their words, these are people living in quote unquote horrific conditions and being forced to pay their rent. And then when they don't pay their rent, they're being forced out through court.
Law New York, it stands for Legal Assistance of Western New York. And they are one of the only groups that is providing pro bono services to people. I want to bring this up because the county legislature is also trying to help out with that. And they just established a $50,000 legal aid fund. It doesn't go to the tenants directly. It has to go to an organization like Law New York, who are then trusted to use that money to represent Asteri residents or whoever else. One thing that stuck out to me when the legislature was discussing that, one thing that they kept bringing up is that it's likely that Law New York is the one organization that's qualified to receive this money, but does Law New York actually have the manpower to meet the need that all these tenants have? And it sounds like at that time when they were discussing that, maybe not.
Law & Y, they've got their hands full.
Right.
They're also representing tenants in a suit against Vecino where they allege that the building violated the warranty of habitability.
What is the warrant of habitability?
To put in simple terms, you're supposed to keep a apartment unit to a certain standard of habitability, of comfort and livability.
Right.
We reached out to them for comment, and they declined to comment on that suit, which has been ongoing for months. And they also declined to comment specifically on the evictions. But what they did send us was interesting. They said that they're committed to advocating for safe housing. And this is from the managing attorney over at Law & Y, Melissa Jackson. Quote, based on the cases we are handling, we believe the management of these developments by Vecino Group has fallen short of the level of care, maintenance, and tenant support that residents deserve. Our focus, however, remains on securing safe housing, unquote.
Have you heard from residents? I know when we were looking through the docket sheet, I definitely recognized some names of people that we've spoken to or we know of.
I did not in court on Thursday last week see anybody I knew or had spoken with, recognize some faces, but I mean, it was a real scene in court is what I'll say. There was somebody that was sort of shouting while they were waiting for their case to come up, and it seemed like they're having maybe an episode of some kind, and they're just saying that they didn't want to burn alive.
Wow.
In the Asteri building. And then there's people who are just quietly waiting for their turn to go before the judge. was very busy, as you can imagine. 28 eviction cases in Asteri, plus the other cases that were on the docket for that day.
You went to this one court date where there were quite a few people on the docket. What's next?
We're going to keep tracking these eviction cases. I mean, maybe Asteri is planning to bring more. We'll see what ends up coming of this. There's clearly going to be, or has to be, a change in how this building is managed in the eyes of lots of local officials and just the community at large. So how is Asteri going to respond to that? And how is the community and local officials going to respond to this wave of eviction cases is what I want to see.
Yeah. Guess we'll see what happens.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks so much for going through the updates with me here.
Thanks for talking through it with me.
All right. I'm Megan Zerez. You're listening to Backstory. We'll be back with some headlines after a quick break. Stay with us.
Want to support us but can't make a donation right now? That's okay. You can still support the Ithaca Voice by signing up for our newsletter. Get the latest local news right in your inbox every day at 5 a.m. Check it out at ithacavoice.org.
I'm Megan Zerez. You're listening to Backstory. Here's some of the other stories we've been following recently. A house fire claimed the lives of 2 people in Dryden on Friday. It's the second deadly house fire in the town in the last 3 months. Officials identified the victims as 38-year-old Kayla Wood and 47-year-old Dennis Davis. 2 dogs also died in the fire. And the City of Ithaca's Common Council will vote to set its budget priorities on Wednesday. It marks an important step in the city's budget drafting process for 2027. And on the topic of budgets, the process is already underway in the county government too, but the early numbers aren't looking too rosy. Right now, Tompkins County officials say they need to close a $9.8 million deficit for next year, but how they'll do it remains to be seen. Officials arrested the owner of a Dryden mobile home park last week after he allegedly placed 30 cans of cat food laced with rat poison throughout the park. Several residents said they needed to seek medical treatment for their pets since then. You've been listening to Backstory, the podcast powered by the newsroom of the Ithaca Voice. Our managing editor is Jimmy Jordan. Ron Van Ormer is our executive director. Our photographer is Casey Martin. Our reporters are Fernando Figueroa, Haley Potter, Brian Crandall, and me, Megan Zerez. That's it for this week. Stay cool.